Operations and Client Services.
Good evening, everyone. A few weeks ago, I celebrated the holiday of Passover with my family. Throughout the Passover service, or Seder, Jews are commanded to combine the bitter and the sweet, to temper the joy of making our way to freedom by remembering the suffering that occurred along the way. Similarly, tonight we celebrate the strength and resilience of our clients, such as Ms. Gray, the dedication and brilliance of the legal aid staff who are sitting among you, and the commitment of all of you who support us. But we also want to remember and mourn all of the members of our community who we've lost over the last 2 years. First and foremost, legal aid lost many clients during the pandemic. COVID, as well as interpersonal and police violence, have taken a tremendous toll on the mostly low-income Black and brown communities we serve. Please join me in a moment of silence to mourn all of our clients, as well as their families and friends who lost their lives over the past 2 years. Thank you. We want to also acknowledge the loss of several individuals who left a lasting mark on legal aid as well as the cause of justice and equity. And their names are in your program. Edgar S. Kahn, a 2004 Servant of Justice Award honoree, was a lifelong advocate for access to justice and a visionary leader who was instrumental in the founding of the Legal Services Corporation. Vernon Jordan, a 2010 Servant of Justice Award honoree, was a civil rights leader with the NAACP and the National Urban League, who began his career fighting segregation. He was a prominent lawyer and close advisor to President Bill Clinton. Jim Springer was a 2012 Servant of Justice Award honoree and a legal aid volunteer for 15 years. During that time, he helped more than 1,000 people seeking representation from legal aid and helped hundreds navigate the Social Security bureaucracy and choose a Medicare Part D drug plan. Jim was beloved by his clients and colleagues for his dedication to our mission, his remarkable lack of ego, and his irreverent sense of humor. One of his longtime clients, Virginia Rayford, described Jim as a gentle giant who for 10 years never gave up on her case. She said about Jim, "He was so kind, and I have been truly blessed to know him." And tonight, we are very fortunate to have Jim's wife, Carol, and his daughter-in-law, Carolyn, here with us. Thank you for being here to help us honor Jim. Lee Horton was the beloved son of legal aid's good friends and supporters, Phil and Roberta Horton. Lee was an old soul, wise and mature beyond his years. He was intellectually curious, he cared passionately about the world around him, and was enraged by the racial injustice that permeates our society. Lee died tragically after suffering a seizure at the age of 18, and his parents have given legal aid the privilege of helping them honor his memory by supporting the next generation of attorneys committed to fighting poverty and racism in the District of Columbia. So tonight, I am pleased to announce the establishment of the Lee Horton Memorial Scholarship for Aspiring Public Interest Lawyers. The scholarship will provide financial support for legal aid interns who would otherwise not be able to work for us because of financial constraints. Thank you to Phil and Roberta watching at home for allowing us to help you honor Lee in this way. Mark Herzog was an omnipresent figure in the legal services community. Whether in his position at the DC Bar Pro Bono program or Sidley Austin, Mark was a huge supporter of legal aid's work and helped ensure that thousands of district residents obtained legal assistance. Mark was a key figure in helping legal aid maintain and support the Sidley Appellate Fellowship that provides critical support to our Barbara McDowell Appellate Advocacy Project that you heard about earlier tonight. And I am pleased to announce that starting next year, the Sidley Appellate Fellowship will be renamed the Sidley Austin LLP Appellate Fellowship in honor of Mark E. Herzog. Thank you to Sidley Austin for their continued support of our work and for allowing us to honor Mark in this way. And to Mark's husband, Administrative Law Judge Christopher Costa, and their son Grant, who are here with us tonight, we are so pleased that you could be here to help us remember Mark and all he did for our client community. Thank you. Although they are no longer with us, I hope we can all take comfort in the knowledge that their legacy lives on through our work. Could we please take a moment of silence to honor all of the members of our client community and our larger community who we have lost over these past 2 years and whose fight for justice we pledge to continue. Thank you. And, well, what is hopefully not the most awkward transition in humankind, we come to the main event. Since 1990, legal aid has had the honor of recognizing some true heroes in the fight for justice with our Servants of Justice Award. Recipients of this award have dedicated their careers to the simple but profound tenet that there should be no price tag on justice. Tonight, we have the privilege of honoring 2 true servants of justice and personal heroes of mine, Dan Jarcho and Fatima Goss Graves, who are here tonight. And to present our first Servant of Justice Award, I am thrilled to introduce Tom Papson. Hang on, Tom. I have to say nice things about you. Tom is a volunteer staff attorney for legal aid, a former board member and former board president, and was also a Servant of Justice honoree himself in 2018. Following his retirement from McKenna, Long, and Aldridge in 2013, Tom began working with the Legal Aid's Consumer Law Unit, where over the past 9 years he has assisted more than 400 clients. Tom's energy and passion for justice is nearly unmatched. Indeed, it was right here on this stage 4 years ago that the term Papsonian levels of excitement was coined. And if you don't already know, you will soon know what that means. So please join me in welcoming Tom Papson.
Good evening. Before my presentation, I'd like to exercise the speaker's privilege for a quick shout out regarding a different award. So, brief digression here. The National Association of Consumer Advocates will next week present Jennifer Lavallee, a supervising attorney in Legal Aid's Consumer Law Unit with its Consumer Advocate of the Year award. This highly competitive, yeah. This highly competitive national award is given to members of the organization who have, quote, made special contributions to advancing consumer protection. These individuals have gone above and beyond the normal call of duty by serving as a voice for their organizations and for consumers in the ongoing struggle to curb unfair or abusive business practices. Jen's selection for that award was based on what was termed her monumental achievements in legislative advocacy before the D.C. Council and in access to justice reform in the D.C. Superior Court. And as someone who has worked closely with Jen for the last 8 years, it is hard to imagine someone more deserving of that national award. Jen, would you please stand up? All right, and now I have the honor of presenting the Servant of Justice Award to my former law partner, current legal aid collaborator, and longtime friend, Dan Jarcho. Dan's public service values run deep. Fresh out of Harvard Law School and a federal district court clerkship, Dan started his career as a trial attorney in DOJ's Office of Consumer Litigation, where he represented the FDA in federal civil and criminal matters. In that role, he also honed the administrative law expertise and brief drafting skills he would later call on to become one of the most prolific pro bono attorneys in legal aid's history. More on that in a moment. Dan and I were longtime colleagues at McKenna Long and Aldridge. After joining that firm, Dan quickly established himself as one of those big law lawyers who somehow managed to make pro bono work a core part of their identity in our profession. Dan followed me onto the Legal Aid Board of Trustees, and in 2014, he began a 2-year term as Legal Aid's board president. After joining Alston and Bird in 2015, Dan continued his pro bono service there. But all of that is mere preface to what happened next. Not long after I joined Legal Aid as a volunteer staff attorney, Chin Lei, then Legal Aid's legal director, and I were discussing the need to find a law firm partner to undertake an unusually challenging pro bono assignment in an important public benefits case that I had consulted on. The case required a lawyer with sophisticated administrative law skills and an ability to cut through complex statutory and constitutional issues. I said, I think you should consider our current board president, Dan Jarcho. This case is perfect for him. Actually, as one accustomed to occasional hyperbole, it was probably more like this. Chin, Dan Jarcho is the world's foremost administrative law litigator. Let's get him. At that time, Chin knew Dan only as an outstanding board member. As Legal Aid soon learned, Dan was much more than that. That first case was Heard v. Social Security Administration, a class action lawsuit challenging SSA's decision to begin seizing tax refunds from persons across the country who allegedly had received overpayments as children decades earlier. Dan's foundational work in that case was masterful. 6 years and multiple appeals later, SSA had ceased the practice, returned the tax intercepts, and ultimately canceled as much as $30 million of alleged debt. And that case was just the first in a series of high-profile cases that Dan handled at Legal Aid. Another was a lawsuit challenging a proposed Trump administration rule that would have cut nearly 800,000 Americans off food stamps. Legal Aid's lawsuit was joined with others filed by several state attorneys general. But Dan's case for Legal Aid and its clients was the only one brought on behalf of individual plaintiffs. On March 17, 2020, Chief Judge Beryl Howell of our district court invalidated the rule just as the pandemic began impacting low-income communities in D.C. and across the country. Yet another of Dan's Legal Aid cases resulted in changes in D.C. Housing Authority practices that had restricted housing subsidies guaranteed to victims of domestic violence under the Violence Against Women Act. But perhaps the most impressive aspects of Dan's ongoing work in Legal Aid's cases are the personal characteristics that have made him beloved by all the legal aiders who have worked with him. My colleague Nina Wu, a public benefits supervisor, explained, quoting, "It was such a privilege to work with Dan early in my legal career. I learned so much from his writing, legal analysis, and the way he deftly handled meetings and reporters. But most importantly, I learned that Dan has a fierce sense of justice and a heart as big as any legal aid attorney. Dan is a shining example of humility, intellect, and pro bono lawyering at its best. And that pretty much says it all. For all these reasons, Legal Aid is proud to honor Dan Jarcho as a true servant of justice."
Wow, Tom, thank you for that gracious and generous introduction. You brought me to my first Servant of Justice dinner about 30 years ago, and I remember looking around a ballroom about this big and not knowing a soul. And you got me started at Legal Aid, much the way Stanley Dees, who we're happy to see here tonight, got you started. And every step of the way, you've been an extraordinary role model for all the work that I've done with Legal Aid, and you've just encouraged me every step of the way, all the way to the podium tonight. I want to thank Legal Aid for bestowing this extraordinary high honor on me. I've always come away from Servant of Justice dinners inspired but so humbled by the accomplishments of the honorees. It's still a little unreal to me that Legal Aid has seen fit to place me in this group. I'd like to thank my wife, Wendy, for her support of all of my work with Legal Aid. And I'd like to thank my law firm, Alston and Bird, for its longstanding support for Legal Aid and my work there. And I'd like to congratulate Fatima on her honor as well. I've had a number of people say to me that it's critical to convene in person for this annual celebration of justice, particularly now. I think I know what they mean. In the 3 years since we last gathered for this dinner, we've witnessed a historic ethical upheaval, an unconstrained attack on our fundamental values, a troubling breakdown in the consensus about basic concepts of what is right and what is wrong. It's not just that there have been 2 impeachments and an insurrection since we last met. In our system of justice, which is the focus of our dinner tonight, we've seen acts antithetical to justice, acts of racial violence against citizens by police officers who have sworn to uphold the law. Partisan prosecutorial decision-making in 2019 and 2020, and more recently, legal ethics experts have even criticized both the actions and the inactions of a Supreme Court justice. Coinciding with these types of incidents, we've seen a conscious effort to blur the clarity of the ethical lapses through gaslighting and deliberate misinformation, obscuring distinctions between fact and fiction, between right and wrong. Even for the most optimistic among us, there's an unsettling worry that the bad guys might be winning. We're left with a sinking feeling that the foundation we're standing on is cracking, that the bedrock is melting into the mantle, that there are fewer and fewer institutions unquestionably committed to impartial justice. What can we do about it? I think we need to turn to those institutions that remain the enduring repositories of our essential values that our system of justice should make real. The principles of fair and equal treatment under the law for everyone without regard for their economic situation. In this city, one of the most important and long-standing storehouses of those values is legal aid. I've had the great privilege to work with legal aid in a number of different capacities. I've seen the inner workings of the organization on everything from the social justice problems that should be our priorities to the challenge of surviving the 2008 economic crash, to the question of how much office space we could afford to lease. As their co-counsel in litigation, I've witnessed legal aid lawyers' extraordinary legal acumen and commitment to social justice in conference calls and email exchanges late at night and on weekends and on holidays. Since I've been associated with legal aid for almost 2 decades in so many different capacities, I had thought I'd seen just about every facet of the organization. But I was wrong. I've gained an even deeper and more profound appreciation for this institution because of its critical role as a protector of our essential values during the period since we last met, the period of the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, the needs of legal aid's client community surged. In that community, people have an annual income of $27,000 or less, and often much less. One of the areas of greatest need, which was discussed earlier, is unemployment benefits, the public benefits guaranteed by law to workers who lose their jobs through no fault of their own. As the city shut down, so did many jobs. Legal aid received a tidal wave of requests from newly unemployed workers who had not received the benefits to which they were entitled. In 2020, legal aid received 20 times the number of requests for help as in 2019. 20 times, and the number went even higher in 2021. This was truly a consequential crisis. For the people in our client community who lose their jobs through no fault of their own, unemployment benefits are the difference between housing and homelessness, between having enough to eat and going hungry. And there was a disturbingly low chance that people with no lawyer would get these benefits at any time soon. What did legal aid do to confront this pressing, unprecedented increase in the need for their services? Under the leadership of Drake Hagner, Nicole Dooley, and Jennifer Mezey, legal aid dramatically reallocated its scarce lawyer and staff resources, increasing the unemployment benefit team from 2 people in 2019 to 13 people in 2020. They also went to work mastering the complexities of a tangle of brand new pandemic-related federal requirements that gave new meaning to the term impenetrable bureaucracy. And I can tell you firsthand that although they've received this avalanche of cases, they have treated each individual case as though it was the most important one they have, often with more than one lawyer collaborating on a single matter. One case has involved a bricklayer, a man about my age who lost his job when the pandemic shut down construction work in the district. Without benefits, he was unable to pay for utilities or rent. Legal aid persistently pressed the DC Department of Employment Services on his behalf, contacting the agency once a week for 35 weeks, attempting an informal resolution. And when the agency remained recalcitrant, they went to court to protect his interests. What kind of institution would see the need for its work expand by 20 times, yet devote this kind of extraordinary attention once a week for 35 weeks to seek justice for a single person unable to afford a lawyer? It's an institution committed to even-handed justice based upon the facts, the law, and the equities, and motivated by the knowledge that fair outcomes are better assured when people have a lawyer as their advocate. Nothing could be more important, particularly now. It's legal aid's rare leadership as a protector of these values that makes this award for helping to pursue justice from this institution the highest professional honor I can possibly imagine. I thank you so very much.
Please welcome Kara Brockmeyer of Debevoise and Plimpton, and co-chair of tonight's dinner.
So, good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce our next presenter, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights of the U.S. Department of Justice, Kristen Clarke. Assistant Attorney General Clarke began her career as a trial attorney in the Civil Rights Division through the Department of Justice's Honors Program. In 2006, she joined the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, where she helped lead the organization's work in the area of voting rights and election law across the country. She has served as president and executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under the Law, where she led the organization's legal work in courts around the country, addressing some of the nation's most complex racial justice and civil rights challenges. In 2021, President Joe Biden selected her as his choice to lead the U.S. DOJ's Civil Rights Division, and she was confirmed in May of 2021, making her the first woman to be confirmed to lead the Civil Rights Division. It is my pleasure to introduce Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clarke.
Good evening. It is wonderful to be here. And it's especially an honor to be here tonight and a privilege to see the judges, attorneys, advocates, legal support staff, and friends who've assembled here tonight, all who share the profound belief that all people deserve equal justice under law in our country. I have the distinct honor of presenting tonight's second Servant of Justice Award to my dear friend and colleague, Fatima Goss-Graves. As the president and CEO of the National Women's Law Center, Fatima stands on the front lines of advocacy efforts that seek to advance gender equity and equal justice for all. Fatima and I stepped into leadership roles of nonprofit organizations just months apart, and I've had the privilege of working in the trenches with her and watching her in action. Every day, Fatima fights to tackle issues central to the lives and well-being of women and girls, issues like equal pay, sexual harassment and gender-based violence, access to reproductive health care, workplace justice, equity for girls in sports, and so much more. She is one of the nation's finest lawyers and policy strategists on issues concerning gender and equity. Whether testifying before Congress, taking legal action, or advocating on behalf of those less fortunate, Fatima always speaks truth to power. And she brings a critical racial justice lens to this work, shining a light on how just about any gender-based restriction that you can think of produces harsher effects on low-income women and girls of color. That ability to speak powerfully about issues that lie at the intersection of race and gender make her voice an especially necessary one today. I've stood with her on the steps of the United States Supreme Court, in the halls of Congress, and out on the streets. And in any setting, she's able to offset anger and agitation with her sobering reminder about the humanity and dignity of women, girls, and families whose lives and health are at stake in the course of this work. In the eye of the storm, you can be sure that Fatima will offer that steady, calm, and level-headed perspective to help chart the course forward. She brings tremendous heart, compassion, and empathy to this work, more than anyone that I know. She's also a movement builder. Many of us bore witness to this in 2018 as she seized on the anger that fueled the Me Too movement to build and co-lead the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund. Time's Up represents principles that lie at the core of the Servant of Justice Award. The organization provides voice to survivors by paying the legal fees and costs tied to cases that often go ignored, cases involving sexual harassment faced by vulnerable, low-wage workers. Across our country, there are women at fast food restaurants, dollar stores, and retail stores who have Fatima to thank for empowering them to expose sexual harassment and other abuses they endured in their workplaces. Women who are often marginalized, invisible, fearful of retaliation, and ignored. When Fatima and her colleagues at Time's Up stepped up to fight the scourge of sexual harassment that we see across the country, there's one particular matter that they took on that stands out involving women at McDonald's in 9 cities across the country. The fast food chain's employees made history by walking off the job during the lunchtime rush and becoming the first employees in American history to stage a multi-state strike against sexual harassment. Those efforts bore fruit. In 2019, a new restaurant and engagement initiative was announced, and McDonald's committed to addressing workplace harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. I can also tell you that the most important part of Fatima's life is her family. Her husband, Matt, and her 2 sons are the true loves of her life, and the work that she does for all of us flows from that place of love. Her desire to ensure that her boys grow up in a world that is more equitable and fair, a world less chauvinistic, misogynistic, and sexist. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "A genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus, but a molder of consensus." And those words truly embody Fatima's moral compass. She has built a career that exemplifies the highest ideals of the legal profession, a career that embodies the steely courage of Harriet Tubman, the righteous defiance of Rosa Parks, the determination of Fannie Lou Hamer, and the hope, possibility, and brilliance of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Please join me in congratulating my trailblazing friend and my shiro, Fatima Goss Graves.
Wow, it's a little bit too much. Thank you so much, Kristen. It's an honor just to receive this recognition tonight, but to accept it with your introduction, it's been a privilege, and your friendship has been a privilege. Thank you. And of course, my deep, deep gratitude to Legal Aid and to tonight's co-chairs, including the incomparable Tanya Robinson, for including me, not only in this esteemed company of Dan Jarcho, but also among so many awardees over the years, many of whom are my personal heroes. In truth, I'm just overwhelmed and humbled and grateful. And I also will confess I'm a little bit uncomfortable up here tonight, which is not typical for me. And part of that is hard for me to even think about myself in any of the same company of some of those heroes, legal heroes of mine, like Marian Wright Edelman, or Avis Buchanan, or Vanita Gupta. But also, in my core, I'm realizing that it is our clients and the storytellers and advocates who we are so privileged to work with every day, who are called upon again and again and again, and these days it feels like constantly, who I want to give accolades to tonight. It's the attorney who took on the unfair rules put forward to undermine our very civil rights. It's the organizers who work tirelessly to be sure that our lawyering actually reflects the needs, the goals, and the desires of our movements. And it's the storytellers who share their experiences in the press, and with policymakers and in community, even when the law has not yet caught up with their own experiences. And so tonight I am just here with such gratitude for all of those people who show up again and again, both quietly and sometimes not quietly, sometimes shouting from the rooftops even when those folks who have the power to make a difference won't listen. And I am also here in support of the folks who, and maybe some of you are in this room, who are the line editors and the redliners and the margins of legal briefs and press releases and legislation, and even in these days, tweets. And I see lawyers will lawyer even in the tweets. I see all of you. You make a difference. And that actually leads me to the National Women's Law Center. And my many, many accolades belong to the tremendous team that I am so lucky to be able to work alongside every day. I just have to say, confidently so, that our team is just one of the best. They have held the line these last years. They've worn themselves out these last years in service of gender justice, in service of our very democracy. And similar to the work of Legal Aid, in devotion always to a better way. For women who were struggling in this pandemic, for students who deserve to learn with safety and with equity, for workers whose labor powers our country and were deemed essential, yet their wages were barely livable, and their conditions have long been not sustainable. And most certainly, the folks at the National Women's Law Center are seeking a better way for our reproductive freedom, autonomy, and agency, including reminding those who forget that the right to abortion is justice, it is healing, it is health care, and it is settled law. And I have to tell you, as we gear up for the fight of our lives and an unprecedented assault on those rights, how lucky I am to be surrounded by the very best at the National Women's Law Center. Some who have joined me here tonight. I should also mention my family, who they put up with the byproduct of my passion, which sometimes means long hours and sometimes means travel or ill-timed phone calls or staying up late to read a leaked opinion or whatever it is. And especially to my husband who is here with me tonight, Matt Graves, who is by day the U.S. Attorney, but really makes all of our lives possible. And to my parents, who are, I think might be Zooming in. I don't know if that worked out for them. But if they are, what I want to say is they gave me and my sisters a giant gift. And that is an ability to dream, to imagine worlds that absolutely do not exist, to imagine any role for ourselves. And they gave us, at the same time, a deep grounding in our community, always. They helped us at every turn remember our purpose and that it is always bigger than ourselves. So thank you, if you're watching, if the Zoom worked. But it is really because of my parents and their own experiences that I really grew up understanding the importance of equal access to justice, and importantly, that concept of justice is not something academic, it's not locked in some ivory tower accessible to only those with means and boundless privilege. Justice should live and breathe with, and ideally for, the least among us. And it also means that folks should be able to see themselves always in the people who are lucky enough to be in a position to make justice. And we saw just how powerful that was in the joyful confirmation of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. It's not a small thing to see someone who looks like you, who may have lived like you, to be on any court, let alone the highest court in the land. And it's not a small thing to come to a place like Legal Aid or to contact the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund and meet someone who may have shared your experience and who wants to fight for you despite the rocky path ahead, and sometimes even because of it. And to borrow for now Justice Designate Jackson, it is then and on the rockiest of paths that justice can be found in the act of persevering. We will not always make the law keep our promise, its promise, I guess our promise too. We will not always face friendly opposition. We won't always face fair-minded courts. We most certainly will face stretches of time where our elected officials don't quite behave like they are working for us. And then there are the days when our society and our culture definitely do not get it right. And when it seems like all the cultural debates are making it harder for all of us, when we can believe we are still fighting for our very, very dignity. These are the hardest moments, but there are also the ones that give me hope and that help me persevere. Because it is in these moments when the advocates, when those clients, when the movement lawyers, when the policy wonks, and every single person at Legal Aid and at the National Women's Law Center, it's in these moments when they show up big. And as we face down the days until the Supreme Court rules squarely on abortion access in this country, and as we face the prospect of losing a constitutionally guaranteed right for the first time in our nation's history, I can't help but leave with a call to all of you. Jump in the fight, no matter how hard. Run towards this fire. How lucky we are to have the capacity to do this work, to contribute to something better, to do it alongside smart and generous people, to be servants of justice. And even on the worst of days, well, at least for me, this will remain true. Thank you again so much for this award, and have a good evening.
Please welcome Stephanie Troyer, Legal Director for Direct Legal Services.
Thank you so much, Tom, Dan, Kristen, and Fatima. To say that you have inspired us is an understatement. You are models for all of us who work to make equal access to justice a reality. I certainly can't top your remarks, so I will keep this brief and end with some additional gratitude on behalf of Legal Aid. Thank you to everyone for making tonight a record-breaking evening. Your ongoing support of Legal Aid has sustained us and our client community through incredibly challenging times. And in doing so, you have ensured that low-income DC residents continue to have access to legal services that can make all the difference in the world. Finally, a specific thank you to Tweetu Tran, Legal Aid's Deputy Director of Development. Today is Tweetu's last official day with Legal Aid after a decade, as she follows her passion back to the culinary world. Tweetu's expertise at event planning, among many other things, make nights like tonight possible. We will miss her terribly, but are so excited for her next adventure. Also, thank you to our incredible Director of Development, Rob Pergament, and Development Associate, Catherine Masters. Rob has only been back, yes, thank you. Rob has only been back from parental leave for 2 weeks and already setting records with fundraising for tonight. Tonight was truly a team effort with Tweetu, Rob, and Catherine at the helm. We know that many challenges still lie ahead as we emerge from the pandemic, so please keep this spirit in mind as we make a strong movement into the Making Justice Real campaign this summer. Please now join us in the foyer for a dessert reception where you can stay a while and mingle with colleagues and friends, and we hope you will join us again next year for this dinner. Thank you so much, and good night.